Let me kind of tell you our particular story, and I'm going to start, and then Jo's going to tell you about her experience and reaction to that. And as I go through that, I'll kind of address 4 different areas. I'll describe the affair, the relationship with the partner. Are there any obvious reasons? And when I say obvious reasons, that doesn't mean justification. But is there anything that I can pinpoint now, looking back, that made me more vulnerable? And finally, how and why did it end? So let me go back to the first one, describe the affair. And, you know, it's shameful to be up here and talk about this particular sin in my life, in our lives, but it's even probably more shameful that I have to pluralize that. So I have to make that describe the affairs. So I'm going to talk about the first one, and then let Jo talk about her experience, and then I'll go and talk about the second one. So the first one was what we call an emotional affair, and we're going to be talking about that on another one of the sessions. But really, I didn't think I had done anything wrong. You know, no harm, no foul. It never got to the point of having sex, and so it really wasn't an affair. It didn't fit what I thought was the definition of affair. So we stuffed that, didn't do anything about it, and again, I'll let Jo tell you about how she felt. The relationship of the partners, or partner, in this particular case, we'll talk about the first one. We were the couples, we were great friends. In fact, probably our whole social interaction was with a group of people that went to this church. Now, we had just changed churches to kind of be with all these people, probably not the greatest reason for changing churches, but we had. And then we got involved with this particular couple in a Sunday school ministry. It was a puppet ministry. Had a lot of fun, and you know, we were doing God's work. We really were. And then I also worked with this lady, and that turned into what we called an emotional affair. Are there any obvious reasons that I made this particular choice? Terrible choice. Yeah, it was my mom's fault, and that I'm not trying to be funny here. You know, I came from a family with a very dominant mom, kind of a passive dad, nice guy, and I always kind of resented. Didn't really know that until I went through counseling, but I always kind of resented the fact that my mom treated my dad, I thought, badly. I did. In fact, I can remember kind of the day before we got married, my dad and I were going to pick up our tuxes, and I told him, I said, Dad, you know, I just need to know, I'm getting married now. I don't like the way Mom treats you. He let me know that was kind of his business and not mine, but I think I resented that through our whole marriage. Well, not our whole marriage, not now. Well, it kind of bothers me now still, but yeah, it does. So we just deal with it differently than we did before. So I wasn't going to let somebody treat me like my mom treated my dad. You know, come to find out through some counseling, it really wasn't my mom that I was angry at. It was my dad for letting my mom treat him like that. So, you know, you can go and read, you know, kind of famous psychologists and therapists, and they will tell you, you know, don't you bring that baggage from your family into the marriage. I will respectfully disagree with that. I think you ought to bring that baggage in, but you unpack it together so you understand what both of you are bringing to that marriage. And then, you know, there was quite a long time after, at one of our intensives, I was talking about that, and I think I kind of realized that I learned as much from these intensives as the people that come, is that maybe some of that was that I thought that I'd kind of missed out. As I was growing up and through high school and college, you know, maybe I didn't get to sow my wild oats, because I think I shared with you before, I was just a nice guy. And so I didn't do that, you know. I didn't smoke, and I didn't chew, and I didn't go with girls that do, you know. And so I think maybe that was another subconscious thing. And I'd encourage all of you to try to figure those things out. How and why did that first affair end? I got caught. I'd like to tell you I got right with God and went up to the mountaintop and came back and confessed what I did. I got caught. So I'll let Jo now tell you the rest of the story.
Very interesting, because we didn't really know what an emotional affair was, and as Mike said, he never felt he did anything wrong. So And as he said, she was one of my best friends. So during this time when they were having lunch every day because they worked together, I encouraged that. I thought it was special that they did that and that I could pass thoughts on to her through Mike, which was kind of crazy when you think about it. How did I find out? Is that she told me. She felt that their relationship had become inappropriate. And we talk about emotional affairs that they are just, even I use that term, because there was no sex involved, there was really no wrong done. What I want to say at this point is it was probably the most devastating thing I'd ever gone through. People talk about the adultery diet. I immediately pounds just came off of me. It was kind of amazing when you think about it. So Mike disagreed that there was anything wrong or inappropriate. And I was totally blown out of the water, not knowing what was happening, didn't understand any of it. I immediately said, we're going to leave the church. So, I became very strong in how I felt about that. But inwardly, I was a walking zombie. We never told a soul about it. It was our secret that we kept. Now, that couple, we just kind of dropped off the face of the earth with them. The difficult part was that our kids were involved with their kids. And thankfully, we moved around that time, too. So schools changed and those kinds of things. God does provide a way out when there seems to be no way out for us. That group that Mike was talking about, our social group, it literally split. And part of them sided with her, and Mike was the bad guy, and some of them supported me because I was the victim. So it got very convoluted during that time. We got no counseling. We just suppressed it. I suppressed it. Mike, he suppressed it as well. But I did read a lot of books at the time because it was kind of like I needed some knowledge of what was going on. And what I came to terms with is that Mike was going through a midlife crisis. And that, just reading through books about that gave me some idea that there would be an end to what I was experiencing. So we did nothing, and this is what happens.
So now we move on to the second affair. Now, the first affair occurred 17 years into our marriage, and I thought we had a good marriage. I really did. If in talking to Jo now about this, her sense of whether it was a good marriage or not, probably a little bit different than mine. I would have given it a 10. She maybe not so much. So, as Jo said, we moved churches. You think we were involved in the first church? We really got involved in the second church. I was on the board of directors, which was the governing body of that particular church. Jo, well, I'll let you talk about that, but I was involved with the youth, and we went on trips to orphanages in Mexico and all of that. And then one day, the pastor, I'm in the audience, and he looked at me and he says, Mike, he says, why don't you come up here and be on the platform with me every Sunday? So I went up there, and he just kind of let me have free reign. And I'd like to think I'm funny, and he let me be funny. He really did. So I became the self-proclaimed minister of announcements. I would welcome the people at the beginning of the service. I would receive the offering. I would be down praying for people. And during the announcement thing, I just thought I was really, really funny. And people would tell me that. And I became really, really spiritually arrogant. We started a young married group, Jo and I, and we probably had 100 couples on Sunday morning. In fact, I kind of joked to the pastor, Pastor, maybe we need the sanctuary there because it seats more. I think there may be more people in ours than yours. And that's what happened. And I was God's man of might and power. I really was. And I used to love walking in on Sunday morning, shaking hands with people. I even thought, I wonder what my funeral's going to be like. There's going to be lots of people there. It's kind of sick. It really was. It really was. So, don't think, there's another lie, don't think church is safe. It's your relationship with God that's going to keep you safe. So what about the relationship to the partner? In this particular case, I was a principal and had met this person, and she asked me to pray for her. She was going in for some surgery. And why wouldn't she? I mean, I made no secret of my faith, and that's what she would do. And I did that. I then changed districts, got a promotion, and now I was the superintendent. I was the boss. And sometime after I was there was a call from her. Didn't take it. I'd like to tell you I wasn't worried about anything being wrong, but I kind of was, if I'm going to be honest. And so she called again, and she called again, and she called again, and she called again. I think it was like 16 or 17 times. And I was strong. And then I answered the 17th one. And a series of terrible, terrible decisions, and that turned into a full-blown sexual affair. It wasn't emotional. This one was sexual. Any obvious reasons? Yeah, same one as before. We had never dealt with that baggage that I brought into the marriage. Only this time I was really a whole lot worse, and Jo will share that. She really will. How and why did it end? Jo will elaborate just a bit, but I got caught again. And at first I denied it. That lasted about 2 or 3 days. And then one day, it was an afternoon, I think, about 4 o'clock, Jo storms into my office. And of course, there's all kinds of people, in the outer office, and kind of bursts into the room and confronts me. I finally got her out. People were probably wondering what the heck is going on. Got her in the car. I still denied it, finally got to a stop sign in the country because we're just driving around, and I turned around and I said, "Yep, you're right." And she slugged me she probably wanted to kill me. Thank goodness she wasn't strong enough to do that, and then was going to jump out of the car. I just kept driving. I thought she can't get out when we're going 60 miles an hour. So that's how it ended. Jo.
Okay, by the way, this was 13 years after the first affair, and as we said earlier, we did nothing about it. We did no counseling, got no help, sought no help. So did I know or suspect? No. I seriously would never have imagined that he could hurt me like he hurt me 13 years earlier. So that wasn't even a consideration. So how did I find out this time? I was on staff where Mike was the minister of announcements, and we had a church picnic. And at the church picnic, one of our good friends came up to me and said, "Do you think Mike's having an affair?" And I said, "No." I said, "Right now he is a creep, a jerk, so mean, nasty." There was just nothing. And like I said, in the earlier one, I thought he had a midlife crisis. This one, I really thought he had a midlife crisis because we had no answers. But this time my reaction was really different. When I came home, and Mike kind of told you what I did at the office, I totally flipped out. I was filled with so much anger, rage, bitterness. Neither one of us recognized who I was. Our kids were grown, out of the house, so we had full reign of a crazy house. It was World War III at our house. Mike would come home from work, we'd pull down the blinds and just start yelling and screaming at each other. So within a week, I had a counselor in line, and I told Mike I was going to the counselor and he could come if he wanted to. He chose to come, and it was good, really good. And my whole thing is, because I had so much anger, and my anger was not only directed at Mike, it was directed at God, because certainly God knew that I was a good Christian, the one who wanted to forgive and forget. that good Christian struggled that God allowed that to happen in my life. I really had a hard time with that, thinking that I did everything the right way. And then the other reason was that I was angry at myself, because how could I be married to someone who would hurt me intentionally again? As time went on, and as Mike said, it took a long time for us to get through this, and thankfully the counselor just hung in there with us. But I became the person who was going to talk about this. I told everybody, a lot of people. The first time we told no one. This time I told friends, family. Actually, I made Mike call his parents and tell him, which was a very awkward situation. My parents had already passed on, which thankfully, because they thought so much of Mike that this would have been, that would have killed him again. So we started counseling immediately. I thought it was going wonderful. I had someone who was actually listening to me and validating me and telling me, shaking his head when I talked. And then Mike stopped coming. He felt that he was being the microscope, or the bug on a microscope. Yes, and so he quit coming, but I continued because I needed to find out what was wrong with me. Why did I stay married to this guy who would be so hurtful? And then within 3 months, Mike was back because he couldn't stand the fact that he knew we were talking about him. And when he came back, we continued for a year, a solid year, and came to that place of saying, probably like Mona and Gary said, we became stable. But at that point, he introduced us. Well, he asked us if we'd like to meet with another couple. And I still had so many questions. So I was I felt so alone in this. And so our counselor asked us if we'd be interested in meeting with another couple. And I said, yes, absolutely. Mike said, no way.
Much.
Yeah. So we met with Mona and Gary for a year, which was so helpful because I got to talk to someone who felt the same way I felt. At least I could recognize the pain that she felt because I was still dripping with it. Even though we'd had counseling and had figured a lot of stuff out, I needed someone to walk right next to me, apparently. So we did that for a year, and then as it would be, and you'll hear this story again and again, is that after meeting with Mona and Gary, we then Sherman asked us to become part of Hope and Healing, and that's when that began.
So to clarify, Sherman was our counselor. Now, when the second affair was revealed, and I did not want to get a divorce. I know that sounds silly. Why would I have committed adultery and I wanted to stay married? But I did. And so in my mind, what I was going to do is I was going to fix it. Because that's what men, I thought, did. That's what husbands do, right? If you were responsible for something, or even if you weren't responsible for it, then if there was an issue, a problem, you fixed it. So I thought I knew how to fix this. And it didn't matter what I tried. It did not work. See, I was trying to do this in my own power. I wasn't looking to God. I asked God to forgive me, but then I let it go at that, and now I was going to fix the marriage. So nothing worked, and we weren't. Excuse me. And so we were not just moving forward; we were moving backward. In fact, we were in a death spiral. As Joe said, it was World War III. It's very fortunate that we didn't have the police out at our house on numerous occasions. And you know, when I called all those people, when I talked to our kids, when I talked to my parents, when I talked to my siblings, you know, that was hard. But the hardest one, I think, was my son, who said, "Dad, you had better not blow this again, because I'll come and I'll beat the snot out of you." He would, and at my age and his age, he probably could. And the kids gave Joe permission to leave me. You know, if that's what you need, we'll support you. You know, kick the bum out if that's what it's going to take. By the way, that relationship has not only come back, it's better than it ever has been. So we were in this death spiral, And it was about 8 months in, and I was on my way to work. By the way, work was going downhill too. It's kind of funny. Satan says, this is okay. It's not going to hurt anybody, and then the whole thing falls apart when the sin comes out. So I was on my way to work. It was raining very hard. I had both hands on the wheel. At that point in time, cell phones were so big, I wouldn't have had that in my hand anyway. If you're law enforcement listening to this, I was not speeding. This road had a kind of a tendency for water to puddle. I was going about 60 miles an hour. And one moment I'm going down the side of the road that I'm supposed to be going down. The next I'm going down the opposite side of the road, kind of at a three-quarter angle. And all I saw was cars coming the other way. And at that point, I knew I was going to die. I really did. And it's kind of funny because I not that I thought about that a lot, but I thought if that ever happens, I'd probably be screaming, and I wasn't. I knew I was going to die, and it was kind of calm. It was kind of like things went in slow motion. Mm-hmm. And I confess that the last thought that I had before I hit that first car was, at least Joe won't have Mike to kick around anymore. I was so tired of her anger. I was so tired of the struggle. And it wasn't as if the struggle was getting us anywhere. It wasn't. When I hit the first car, my head hit the side of the window and broke that window. Ended up totaling 4 cars in all. When I regained consciousness, the rain was coming in. There was blood dripping down from my head, and there was a gentleman, and he was laying hands on me, praying for me. Still don't know the name of that guy. I wish I had found out. They took me by ambulance to the hospital, and Joe was ticked. This shows you how deep-seated her anger was, and it was justifiable anger. It really was. She was mad that death would be too an easy way out. I wasn't going to have to go through the things that she was going to have to go through, and now she was going to have to face them as a widow, and have to deal with all that stuff. So we went to the counselor. We were going to the counselor every week on a Tuesday. I remember our day was Tuesdays. It was, wasn't it? Tuesdays. Yeah. And so I had stitches. I looked on my head, I think 30 stitches, probably 15, but I like to exaggerate. And I looked like Frankenstein's monster. Did I say that already? Mm-hmm. Okay. I looked like Frankenstein's monster twice. And I thought maybe I'd get some sympathy, at least from the counselor, who's Sherman, was our counselor, and he agreed with her because she said, "I want a divorce." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm paying you too, and you're agreeing with her that the divorce is okay. But he did say, but that's a pretty serious decision. That's a major decision in your life. Why don't you go home? We have another appointment next Tuesday. And you think about that and you pray about that. And so she said, okay, I will do that. So it's the weekend between the next Tuesday, and Joe and our girls, our son was still away from college down south, and the girls, they had jobs, and so they're at a Bible conference at a Christian campground called Mount Hermon. And I'm thinking, this is my last weekend to be married, and so I'm trying to cook, and I couldn't even load the dishwasher. I couldn't. I had no clue what I was doing. I thought I'll starve to death if I don't learn how to cook, and I can't even remember what I was cooking, and I think I had to throw it away. And so while things are being prepared on the stove, I went down to the end of the counter, and I had a conversation with God, and. It wasn't just a prayer. It was a real conversation with God, and I didn't ask God to have Joe forgive me. I asked God to make me the kind of person that Joe would want to forgive. And I said, God, you're my last hope. You're my last hope. I have no other hope. If you can't do something, my marriage is not going to survive. And he answered that prayer in a really powerful way. In fact, it wasn't an audible voice, but I would not have been surprised. I would not have been surprised. If there had been a burning bush in the kitchen, that wouldn't have surprised me, or a finger of fire in the sky. And he said, Mike, I'm going to save your marriage. He did also ask me what took me so long to get to that point. I got to that place where God wants us to be all along, and I think that was, if there's a positive coming out of this, it's that God wants you to be broken. He really does. And I thought I'd been broken before, but I hadn't. I really hadn't. Because I learned this valuable lesson that when God is all you have, God is all you need. He really is. And so when Joe came home from that conference, you would have thought, and it would have happened before, you would have thought that I would have run up to her and says, Joe, I had this wonderful conversation with God, and he's going to save our marriage. But I didn't need to do that because he told me he was. And I wasn't going to use that. I told him whatever he said, wherever he led, I wasn't going to question it. I was going to do it without reservation. I was going to do it with all my might and with all my soul and with all my heart. And so Joe knew that something was different after that conversation that I had with God. And we started that slow process from the pit of hell to a healthy marriage. Now, I want to share one other thing with you. This is I don't know if you can see that. This is my wedding ring. It, however, is not the wedding ring that Joe gave me when we were married a long time ago. She was a child bride, and so inside, this is a wedding ring that she gave me after the second adultery. And inside, and it's inscribed, and that's not necessarily unusual to have a wedding ring inscribed, but it says, or there's inscribed a heart, and then Joe, her name. But even more importantly, is there's the word still. And what she meant by that is that, Mike, in spite of the fact that you betrayed me twice, that you hurt me like I've never been hurt before, I still want to be your wife, and I still love you. I think that inscribed on the very heart of God is the word still. In spite of what we do, in spite of how we sin, and in spite of what he does for us and how much he loves us, he still is going to forgive our sins. That grace that God has for us is really almost mind-boggling. It's very, very difficult to wrap your mind around. It really, really is. But I believe that I understand grace better than most because I sleep next to her every night. Her name is Joe.